Governor Kasich tries to tame the Ohio school funding beast.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News. Joseph Moss, chairman of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, and Mary Ann Sharkey, public affairs consultant.
Governor Kasich is trying to do what Governors Voinovich, Taft, and Strickland could not accomplish. He's trying to meet Ohio's constitutional mandate of an adequate education throughout the state. Good schools for all, no matter where the students live. Kasich says his plan does that.
Our whole basis here is that a child, no matter where they live, no matter what the wealth of the district, has the right, as we feel, to be able to compete with a child in every other district, regardless of wealth. And we didn't care about any political considerations. We did this on the basis of what's best for the boys and girls in the state of Ohio. This proposal is fully funded. People are like, well, how could it be fully funded? How did this happen? Well, because, we've been pretty good stewards.
It's a complicated plan, but here are the highlights. The state would set a minimum level of funding that every district, rich or poor, must spend on schools. To help the poor districts, the state will give them more money. Kasich would eliminate what he calls unnecessary mandates, giving districts more flexibility on things like the school calendar. The state would also reward innovation with extra money. And a big change comes to the private school voucher system. Vouchers would be given to all lower-income students, not just the students in failing schools. Kathy Kandinsky, the governor, said we have not seen the spreadsheets yet, the details. When you look at can he do all that without a lot of extra money?
Well, it seems hard to imagine because he talks about putting a lot of new money or a lot of money into some things like vouchers, equalizing spending in the different districts, money for disabled students. He's adding money for gifted students and so on. So until we see the spreadsheets, what I want to know is we're talking about some new money, but we're also clearly talking about repurposing money that's already in the system. So what's going to change? And those details we're just not going to know until we see the spreadsheets. Now, the good news for districts, and there was a huge sigh of relief, was nobody's getting cut. Everybody's going to have at least the same amount, if not a little more money the next 2 years. And they're going to be freed from a lot of mandates, which is something that school districts have long complained about. So what we might see are different school calendars, things like that schools are going to be able to not worry so much about mandates that coming down from the state outside of health and safety type things.
Does this solve the constitutional issue that has been ruled, the system's been ruled 4 times unconstitutional because it relies too much on property taxes? Does this solve that problem?
Well, ultimately we won't know because hasn't the Supreme Court said they will not rule on this again? So who's going to be the arbiter when it comes to deciding that?
But if we have every district
right.
at the same level, the millage based on a house of $250,000, which is what the plan is, that would seem to give everyone an equal shot.
Well, it seems like every time you increase state aid, and clearly by setting a $5,000 minimum, it certainly does a lot to address the DeRolf decision. I mean, the Supreme Court did punt it away the last time because basically they could not, hold the General Assembly in contempt. So they went ahead and just said, you guys fix it sometime. And Ted Strickland had an opportunity and did not. And I would say that this is John Kasich's first opportunity to address it. And at least the little detail we know so far looks pretty good.
Well, Mary Ann is correct. I guess maybe I would have liked to have seen the General Assembly be found in contempt. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court is not inclined to put any teeth into this. So as a consequence of that, I think that the governor is trying to, at the very least, put money where money is not. and address some things that perhaps need to be addressed. Some additional monies, according to the stories, are also given to exceptional students and also to students that have special needs.
Kathy, compare this to Governor Strickland's plan. You know, in his second year as governor, he came out with his evidence-based model.
Right.
It wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't seem to be as bold as this one is.
Well,
as far as the funding formula goes.
The Kasich administration will tell you that the big difference here is that they're focused more on outcome. They're not prescribing a lot that goes into your system. They're not prescribing a lot of things that you're going to do. They just care about what you produce in terms of students. They're trying to shift to more outcome-based. The evidence-based model was a lot more focused on inputs. Well, the big difference, and I mean not to be funny about it, is that the evidence-based model wasn't funded. You know, by virtue of the economy at the time, there was no money. They never put any money into it, so it was just a kind of a frame of a plan. This, according to the governor's comments yesterday, is funded fully because, you know, now, of course, we're in a lot better position financially in the state, and he can afford to fund it. Those are two big differences, I think.
He can afford to fund it partly because he's not restoring funding that was cut, you know, a couple years ago in his last state operating budget. If he did that and brought districts back up to where they were then, he might not be able to afford it as much.
Well, doesn't, because they are increasing funding. We'll go back to a level playing field that we were 2 years ago.
It seems more like they're redistributing the funding. Well, they're not restoring it.
It's interesting that a Republican governor is basically cutting the wealthiest districts. If a Democratic governor had tried to do that, there would be screams coming from the General Assembly.
Well, now
this time,
now you need to watch. Now, what we need to talk about is the fact that this is a plan proposed by the governor that now goes to the legislature. And a lot of those suburban lawmakers representing those suburban districts, I mean, this may look different by the time we're out of it, because that's where a lot of course, as you're mentioning, a lot of pressure to bear on those suburban districts that aren't going to do as well.
Even though we haven't seen the details, so it's safe to say that the wealthy districts will get less state aid and the less affluent districts will get more state aid. That's a safe assumption. He even said that basically.
Right.
Essentially.
And in all fairness, you know, he's not the first governor. I think starting with Voinovich, they've all tried to direct more money to low wealth districts. The question, I guess what I'll be looking for is what are going to be the gaps in our per pupil spending? What is the range of spending now, and what will the range of spending be when this is implemented?
The voucher system goes from 19,000 eligible students now to, some estimates say, when it's fully funded after 12 years, because it goes 1 year at a time, 2.1 million people will be eligible for the vouchers. How on earth do we pay for that?
Well, starting like he does at the kindergarten level is a great way to build a constituency for that, because these are youngsters that have their whole education before them, and the parents are going to be more apt to get out there and fight for it once they get a foothold.
Well, actually, in Cleveland, part of the Cleveland plan, which is going to be part of his plan eventually, the district is, in fact, working hand in hand with school, voucher programs, and high-performing charter schools are now going to be a part of the Cleveland system.
But that's the key, high-performing.
Right.
There's no distinction when it comes to where the money will go.
And of course, this is always going to be a work in progress. There is no one solution. Oh, now we have it. I think these are just things that just merit consideration and reconsideration as time goes.
Well, that's the question I have. Ted Strickland announced his education reform plan halfway through his term. Didn't do it the first year. John Kasich, halfway through his term. Now, he could win re-election, but he also could get defeated. If he gets defeated, where are we?
Well, but the difference is what Kathy pointed out is that Ted Strickland failed to fund his plan. It appears that John Kasich is going to is funding. At least it's part of his budget.
Yeah.
For 2 years, and there's no, again, and maybe 4 years after that, but going forward long term.
Maybe history is the best lesson here. Is every governor since the DeRolf decision in 1997, I believe it was, has had a school funding plan. So I don't know why we would expect that the next governor wouldn't. I think that's just a perpetual thing.
It is. And especially if he only serves one term, then it's going to be, you certainly want to see it. But if he gets reelected, he'll have 4 more years to put it in place, and it'll be harder to overturn, you could argue.
Right.
Correct.
Our next topic. It has been a while since John Kasich has made an eyebrow-raising comment in public. It's been nearly 2 years since the remark the bus was going to run over lobbyists, and the remark that there was an idiot cop that pulled him over. But the governor is taking heat for something he said this week criticizing groups suing him over Jobs Ohio, the state's quasi-private development agency.
That's what this lawsuit is about. There's no legitimacy to this constitutional issue. Come on, that's a political issue designed to wreck the progress that we're having in Ohio. These are people who are going to have to answer to a much higher power than me about why they have appealed and appealed and appealed.
Marianne Sharkey, has God taken a position on this controversy?
I hardly think so. But then I follow Notre Dame football, and they believe God takes a position there too. But no, I don't think so. But it is always fun to watch John Kasich unplugged, and I think the press corps probably doesn't get enough of this, and probably would like to see more often. Yes, but no, I don't think so. I mean, I think he is frustrated because the Jobs Ohio is incredibly important to what he's trying to do as governor.
House Bill 1.
House Bill 1, correct.
Yep.
And I think there's a disappointment that the Ohio Supreme Court punted on this. They sent it back to the trial court, thus meaning that it's going to be many years of litigation.
Well, how did they punt it? That's what they had to rule on.
Well, they could have decided to be original jurisdiction and take the case. They've done that in some utility-type cases.
Well, I tell you, I, for one, am afraid to say anything that might make the governor angry. I mean, if I have to answer to our higher power. Usually when I have to answer to our higher power is my wife.
He could have meant Karen Kasich.
He may have.
We don't know that for sure.
Well, maybe even the Constitution.
Well, the comment, as a matter of fact, the comment was made that perhaps he ought to be concerned about the higher power being the Constitution of the state of Ohio.
We haven't heard one of these in a while. We thought when he first took office we were going to get one a week. But it's been 2 years since he really said anything controversial. And this isn't even that controversial. It's just it's been a while. Are we surprised? I mean, he's been pretty restrained.
It's message discipline. I think his staff has worked very hard on making sure that they keep John Kasich on message.
Well, there's been 2 years, but then again, there was last year during the State of the State address that we all were wrapped for 2 hours around or so. And it wasn't like he made any gaffes per se, but
I was having a conversation this morning at the courthouse, and I guess my observation is that since SB 5, that he has calmed down, and I think perhaps he has taken a more measured approach to his dialogue.
And I would say his approval ratings reflect that.
To the issues he raises. Is it not constitutional to question the spending of $500 million of public money by a private agency?
Yeah, he's making it sound like it's a frivolous complaint, and it is not. I think it's something that does merit some review.
It's a big change in a funding stream issue. And also, by the way, there is a conservative group that has hopped on board with the original group, Progress Ohio, now the 1851.
The Tea Party group, basically.
Basically, a Tea Party group, and far from, and they make strange bedfellows, but they're on the same side of this issue.
What are the, he suggested a change in state law that would allow, defendants in a lawsuit to recover legal fees from plaintiffs if the judge agrees. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? What are the implications of that?
Yeah, as an attorney, I think it's a bad thing. I think it chills the review, the consideration of issues that may have more or less merit. In the absence of discussing these things within the judicial system, what are you going to do? Fight it out in a back alley someplace.
Well, what about frivolous lawsuits? I think that's what he was getting at.
Oh, it is frivolous. I think it depends on the eye of the beholder.
This issue of tort reform is actually what it is. I mean, it's been debated over and over and over again in the General Assembly, and it does have a chilling effect on people who cannot afford. I mean, you're going to have a two-tier system. You're going to have people who can afford to go to court and people who cannot afford to go to court. And frivolous is something that judges can make a decision on when they see the lawsuits. They usually know frivolous.
They already
can do that. That is correct. And oftentimes those lawsuits are dismissed early on.
Governor's race, relatively quiet this week. Ed Fitzgerald apparently hired former Strickland
Aaron Pickrell
campaign coordinator. Richard Cordray, rumors, but most people say he's going to stay in Washington and see what happens with the nomination. John Kasich has $2.1 million, though. What does that do to potential Democrats getting in this race?
It's a challenge, needless to say, but it's really interesting that Fitzgerald is gearing up. I mean, he seems to have some energy behind his interest for this. But it remains to be seen. It's still early.
Marianne, you're from Cleveland.
Yes,
What's the talk
right.
up there, Mr. Fitzgerald's hometown?
Well, almost everybody seems to believe that, he's pretty serious. I mean, they obviously, by picking Aaron Pickrell, who has worked on the Obama campaign in Ohio and was also Ted Strickland's campaign manager, he picked somebody who's not going to just sign up for the campaign that is going nowhere. I mean, I think it's a serious move by getting, and it's a good move to get Aaron Pickrell because he's well regarded. And so I think everybody believes now that Ed Fitzgerald is quite serious about a run.
Northeast Ohio is key to any Democrat seeking the governor's office. How much of an advantage does he have a huge advantage over John Kasich up there?
Well, yes, he does. I mean, obviously Cuyahoga County is the Democratic stronghold in the county, and so in the state of Ohio. So, I mean, you have to come out of there with, Obama won Cuyahoga County by 230,000 votes, enough to offset what happened in downstate Ohio.
Yeah, and let me mention, and I've mentioned this before, and the phenomenon that we had in 2010, and there were 55,000 fewer votes in 2010 than there were in the previous gubernatorial election, as a consequence probably because of the scandals that were going on.
But I will say that John Kasich's been doing a very good job up in Cuyahoga County. He spends a lot of time up there. He's done a lot of work with Mayor Frank Jackson of Cleveland. They worked on the Cleveland school plan together. So John Kasich is at least trying to hold that vote down.
Mm-hmm. All right. It looks like some government agencies may have extra money. Governor Kasich says the state enjoys a $1 billion surplus. The city of Columbus is quickly filling up its savings account and seemingly has enough extra money to spend on special projects. Both the city and the state benefit from the improving economy. The state has cut spending in some areas like local governments, and Columbus, of course, raised its income tax a few years ago. Ann Fisher, $1 billion surplus the state enjoys. First of all, do you believe that's the number?
I don't know. It's not a matter of what I believe. It's like, when did you stop beating your mother? I don't know. But the bottom line is, if there is that kind of a surplus, there are a lot of people waiting in line to get some restoration of funding that was lost 2 years ago, and probably for good reason, because of the way the economy was. Now they're saying, okay, we ponied up, now you got to help us out again, because all they end up doing is pushing it down the line, kicking it down the road to the local governments. Local governments are not only did they lose funding from the local government fund, they also lost revenue from the estate tax, which was abolished. So there's that. There is schools and public works. There are a lot of other places to put it, but having a rainy day fund is not such a bad idea. They've had one before, and it came in handy when when revenue went south a few years back. So that's not saving it is not a bad idea. The question is it there, and are there other places that need it? Because it's not necessarily saving taxpayers' money if they're just paying it at the local level.
Well, assuming it's there, and I do assume it's there, but this governor's indicated he has no intention of depleting it. I mean, he's said that he thinks having a rainy day fund is a good idea, and he's also, I think, cautioned some of the local governments and others that took cuts that they're probably not going to see that money restored. That said, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure in the legislature, again, with lawmakers that answer more directly to this constituency group than the governor does, to kind of restore some of those cuts. So it'll be interesting to see what, we know the governor's going to put more money into education to some degree. I'm betting that the governor's going to expand Medicaid, like he's been talking about. What's he going to do beyond that?
Well, I mean, John Kasich has to start out with that position with the General Assembly, right? Because he knows if there's money there, they're going to want to spend it. So, I mean, he's going to have to start out with saying $1 billion. But I do agree that we have all been around the state long enough to remember the times when we actually needed that rainy day fund, and it is possible that will happen again in this economy.
One of the reasons why John Kasich and the Kasich administration cut the local funding was they were out of money, for one reason. But they wanted local governments to reform, to become more efficient, to share services, to spend less money. Have we seen that, Joe?
I don't think that we have seen that yet. If anything, I think what we have seen is request for the people at the local level to pay more taxes. And as a consequence of that, I think the balance has not, we haven't gotten to a point where it makes sense yet. I'm not sure that we ever will. Maybe it's just a matter that we have to look
Does
at
it take
this
more than
every
2
other
years?
year, every year.
Does it take more than 2 years to get local governments to change how they do business?
Oh.
If the first levy passes, or the second levy, or the first levy even fails, they're just going to try again.
It's still
I
a
would think
culture
so.
change, a huge sea change for the entire state. But I think that what he can do is use this money as a leverage to get some of those changes put into law instead of just encouraging them.
This is my favorite line during a recession when you ask a politician, are you going to raise taxes? Because a lot of times governments need money. And they say, a recession is not a good time to raise taxes. To which I always ask, when is a good time to raise taxes? The economy is improving. We have $1 billion surplus. Why not raise
them then?
taxes
Yeah.
and repair bridges and roads and set up scholarship funds for low-income high school students? Is now a good time to raise taxes?
Now is probably about as good a time as any. I mean, the city of Columbus raised taxes significantly at a time when the economy was beginning to go down, or maybe it was already
2009
down,
was in the pronounced
down
depths,
already
yeah.
by about a year into it. And as a consequence of that, as a matter of fact, the city is doing fine. It is considered to be a dynamic place to live. It's also showing a surplus, not to the level that
Well, it's
it
only
should
a city,
roll it back.
$53 million.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think John Kasich clearly is not going to raise taxes. Facing re-election, having come off a pledge of not raising taxes and actually a pledge of cutting taxes,
Right.
he's not going to do it. And now he's sitting on a $1 billion surplus. So, I mean, the odds are just, absolutely nil that he's going to be raising taxes.
Why do you want to raise taxes, Mike?
I don't know. I just want to. I love the line. Now is not a good time to raise taxes. When is a good? Because when the economy improves, they cut the taxes. Then the economy goes down, and then it's not a good time to raise
I will
taxes.
say what would be easy to raise is gas taxes because nobody knows what the price of the pump is.
That's
And
right.
that would be
Every day it
the
changes.
easiest
And it
thing in the
fluctuates.
world to raise is a gas
That's
tax.
right. Or the fees
However,
for the gas wells.
He may not raise taxes per se, but then that's just semantics, isn't it? There are always revenue enhancements,
Right.
which was a term coined by the Voinovich administration back in the day. And there is the tax or the tax on the shale and oil
the gas,
drillers
that's what I mentioned.
that's still in play.
And don't forget, when the economy improves, more people have jobs. They make more money. They pay more taxes. You really don't need a tax increase to get more
Well,
money.
remember what Jim Rhodes used to say? You have to elect Democrats every once in a while because somebody has to raise the taxes.
All right, our last topic. Ohio is not a border state like Texas or Arizona or California, so immigration reform is not as big of an issue here as it is in those states. But Central Ohio is seeing rising immigrant populations, and many of the immigrants are undocumented, so they and others are watching closely as the president and Congress propose giving those immigrants a chance at citizenship while trying to tighten down border security. Joe Maas, what happens in Central Ohio if we get a reform
In a
package?
big week on this topic, Central Ohio has probably about 40,000 undocumented immigrants. In the state of Ohio, we were discussing yesterday, maybe about 110,000. So it is an important number, and it is an important topic. This week, we had conversations originating from the Senate, the Gang of Eight, or the 8 senators that revealed their plan. The president also gave a major speech on immigration, and both basically addressed the same thing: path to citizenship, border security, and verification of by the employer and punishment to the employer in the event that after that it's done. It also has a quirky little element, and that is certification that the border is secure to maybe trigger some of these things. That one is a little stranger.
What is a secure border? Is it just a moving target that could help people avoid this reform?
We're already at zero level if you count the people that are being deported and so
in
on.
Northeast Ohio, we're actually seeing border patrols along the Canadian line.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm trying to figure out how many people are coming over on the Canadian line into Cleveland. I don't know, but I mean, you could see the border patrol
Indeed.
cars all over the place.
There's some ungodly amount of money being spent on, by Homeland Security to manage this. Since they said it's more money than the CIA, the FBI. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So they're definitely throwing some money at this. How do you define border security? I think that's a really good question, and is I think the really nebulous thing going into all of this.
Could be a loophole. We're going to get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Marianne Sharkey, you're up first.
Well, as you know, Art Modell is up for a nomination for the Football Hall of Fame, and all of my fellow Clevelanders are writing letters and calling in talk shows, and I would say that he is not going to make it.
If he does, that bust will be in a protective covering in Akron or in Canton when it gets
Yes.
there. Joe.
Staying on immigration reform, Mike, ultimate success of this bill or any kind of a bill will have to take into account the phenomenon of the House members who are from safe districts, because it's about 75 of House members. This is in the U.S. House of Representatives. Speaker Boehner will at least have to abandon or suspend his policy of having any bill receive majority support within the Republican caucus, like he did in the fiscal cliff, and then this bill will have a chance.
Ann.
I think that this will have a chance, unlike another set of proposals that were put out there recently, which is the gun control proposals. It seems like all of the energy that was going toward that a couple weeks ago has faded again, just like it always does.
Cooperation's not going to make Congress look any better, though. I think that the school funding plan, widely praised this week. I think it's going to be a different story next week when the numbers come out.
All right.
We'll have to talk about that next week.
I predict, it could be a very bad weekend for Cleveland sports fans if the former Browns, the Ravens, win the Super Bowl, and if Art Modell gets into the Hall of Fame. We'll be ready for baseball season to start come Sunday afternoon. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Please check us out online. We are on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can continue the conversation there and at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel here at WOSU at COSI, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.